When does land become important, significant, something special, something more than a parking lot? Well, today I found that out by coming out to a site where the Civil War Trails organization was putting up a sign. You see, I had passed by this site so many times, I never really ever gave it a thought. But then I came out here and I met some people that consider this place important to themselves because they had people who fought here from their family. I'm out here at the Teamsters Local 95 building, where there's a parking lot that's right off the side of a busy highway in front of an auto parts store. Looks like a Car Quest. And there's an old abandoned home here and a couple of rundown buildings. And you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at this place, but something extremely consequential happened here a long time ago. We're talking May 5th, 1862. The Battle of Williamsburg took place here in Williamsburg, Virginia. But a very specific group of people fought at this location. And thanks to one man who was doing a lot of research, he was able to dig up a photo that leads to the sign. His sleuthing does the work. And he tells the story of a couple of soldiers that are out here. The dedication today was to them and to their units. New Jersey had young men in it, in the units that fought out here. We're talking guys as young as 17 years of age. And they all signed up for the same reason, primarily, which was to save the Union, to fight the enemy that was trying to tear apart the United States. And then eventually would find other reasons to fight. But these young men would put their lives on hold to come out here in the Peninsula campaign with McClellan and his army. And out here, two of those men that are in that photograph would find the end of their lives. The end of their lives would lead to a long period of history in between. And then a young man later on finding a photograph and stumbling into a couple of graves and being curious about them. The teamwork from the organizations out here leads to a sign being placed on the roadside. And just like the cars are passing by right now, one after another, many people don't stop. They don't even pump the brakes to see what's going on out here. But when you pull into this wayside here and you read the story on that sign and you realize what happened over here, some of the war stories that you hear from World War II are pretty comparable to what happened at this location. Now, not every trail is what it seems to be. And out here in Williamsburg, the Civil War history is just kind of buried. You have to find it by going out into the fields and the woods to check out the earthworks, all the fortifications that are built that still exist out here in these locations. There's a park called Quarterpath Park, and it's right behind where the Fort Magruder Hotel is, the Hotel and Conference Center, which we're about to go over there here in a little bit and check out the conversation that's going to be had about the soldiers that were found in colonial Williamsburg. But you would never know that these earthworks existed out here unless you take that path or that road down here and see the Civil War Trail sign on the side of the road. So the 6th, 7th, and 8th New Jersey are rushing into action. And they're going into a ravine, kind of like what's over my shoulder here. They're rushing in as fast as I can. They get into the tangled underbrush, and the rain has been driving down hard, real heavy. That rain makes the underbrush and the hills slippery. Some of these young men start to fall and slip. Some of the soldiers are tripping over each other. And then, what do they have waiting on them? Confederate soldiers. Muskets lined up ready to go, and cannons. They are behind their own entrenchments. They are ready to fight. And essentially, they're preparing to block the advance of the Union Army. New Jersey rushes forward. They get into that ravine and they start fighting. And it's kind of a back and forth game at that point. The Confederates push them out of place, and New Jersey starts to go back up that hill, back up to the top where we're at that sign, somewhere in that general vicinity. And what they have waiting on them up there is their own lines where the cannons are placed, firing down towards the Confederate soldiers. Thanks to the placement of those cannons, the Union reinforcement that comes up just in the nick of time by Kearney, and New Jersey themselves turning around and being a part of the fight, it works out for them. I'm out here in Williamsburg, and I came out to Redoubt number 2 to talk about the location where some of the fighting happened, and kind of give you a perspective of what the terrain looked like when New Jersey rolled into the ravine, because a lot of the spots out here look a lot like a ravine. And at Redoubt number 2, I saw something that was kind of alarming. If you look behind me here, this horseshoe-shaped patch of ground is an earthwork. Now, the sign details exactly what it is, but the reason why this is alarming is you can see how the concave area is here, and there's a lot of brush that's inside. But if you look up along the top here, it's starting to get really pale in color right up there. Now, that's not because of exposure to the wind and the rain. This is because people are walking on top of it. And it wasn't that long ago, a couple of years back when I came out here, that this was a lot higher than what it is today. Now, I don't know who does this or why they do it. I guess because people are interested in standing on top of mounds of dirt, which is essentially what an earthwork is. But it's emplacements that were put here 160 plus years ago by soldiers. And it's a part of our history. You have to stay off of it. Can't climb on it no matter how cool it looks, and your kids can't climb on it no matter how much they want to. This isn't King of the Fort out here. We're talking about history that's literally, that history is being wiped away right now because it's so exposed with the sun and the wind and the rain hitting it. After people are treading on it, the dirt is crumbling and falling down the hill. There's not much of it left anymore. It's been there for 160 years. It might not last another 10. So, just a reminder to all the people out there. I know most of the people that follow me and go watch my videos, they have a preservationist kind of way of thinking. But if you don't, and you see this video, then kindly keep off of the earthworks. Get close to them, check them out, make videos about them, talk about them, whatever you want to do. Just don't walk on top of them. I'm out at Redoubt number 2. This is out here in Williamsburg at that quarter path trail I was telling you about. I come out here often and I check this place out. A lot of people come out here to exercise, but I'm mostly out here just to look, kind of live in the moment when it comes to history, because it's tucked away neatly back here in the woods. It's a place where the only people that really come back here are the folks that are looking for a nice walk, or historians and history interested people. But this place is extremely important. This line out here saw some extremely heavy fighting. It also saw the evacuation of the Confederate Army after May 5th, because the forces had to dwindle their way down and get onto a road and evacuate out of here somehow. There's a road just on the other side of this. It goes off in the distance. And the cavalry for the Confederacy actually came up through that road. And that's one of the main evacuation routes for the Confederate Army as they were trying to leave. The main point for this fight here was to slow that Union Army down, and then eventually get back to Richmond into the defense works over there and fight in Richmond to protect the capital of their fledgling government. So here we are today out here at the Civil War Trail site, and there's a big event going on where they're telling the story of the New Jersey soldiers that were out here fighting at Williamsburg during that fateful battle of May 5th of 1862. And this large gathering of people behind me here are somehow involved in this situation, where maybe they have some relatives, or they're from New Jersey themselves, or maybe they're just fans of the Civil War Trails organization. But they're out here right now checking this sign out and really being a part of the history of the Civil War Trails itself. And so this organization has over 1,500 signs across multiple states that are in place telling the history of the soldiers and the common citizens that were involved during the American Civil War and the fight and struggle for our country and our nation. And out here today, we had the pleasure of being able to see a historian give an account of one of those soldiers that was here during that battle.
Good morning, friends.
Good morning.
So here we are, 162 years to the day, and almost at the moment that the 2nd New Jersey Brigade goes into the action in what was a torrential downpour.
We couldn't give you everything.
It doesn't feel like it with the railroad and the 2 highways, but you all know, because you're here today, that there's immense power in a place. You have stood where the 1st Minnesota held at Gettysburg. Many of you have walked across Pickett's Charge. And when you're in those places, you feel that power, because it paints a picture for your imagination of like these meritorious moments and actions by people who are otherwise common, who rose to that occasion. And I was reminded this morning that the young men on this sign were in their late teens and early 20s. I don't remember my late teens and early 20s, which tells you all you need to know about my late teens and early 20s. But their future was put on hold, and in many cases cut short, to secure the future of this nation. Far different from my late teens and early 20s. There's also power in a good story well told. And here we are on this anniversary, and while it does not feel like we have power in this place, what the Old Baldy Civil War Roundtable has been able to do is give this place, which doesn't look like Gettysburg, power. And they've enabled this story to be something that for people who drive by on their way from Busch Gardens to Williamsburg, they could enjoy this story and find inspiration from it. So you stand in their footsteps today, and I hope you enjoy it and find inspiration from it.
Dan Casella is a podcaster, but he's also a historian of sorts, and he loves the American Civil War. And he was visiting a grave and came across a couple of soldiers' graves, and he got curious. So he decided that he was going to look into it. And turns out that the soldiers that he visited just happened to be soldiers that fought here in Williamsburg, Virginia. He ends up doing a little bit of work looking through books that had New Jersey units, and he was able to determine a picture that had 4 or 5 soldiers in it actually belonged to those New Jersey units that fought here. And in that picture, we'll put it up on the screen here so you can see what we're talking about. 2 of those men died as a result of combat here. Out of the men that are in that picture, only 2 end up going through the war unscathed, meaning the rest are crippled somehow by the war. So that's pretty amazing stuff. And it just goes to show, you know, if you have the passion for it, you like history, you really like digging into the information and trying to make a difference with it, you can. With his information and his work on those units, he was able to create something that the Civil War Trails organization could use in order to put signs up out here in Williamsburg. So really, that sign's not just a legacy marker for the New Jersey units. It's kind of a legacy to guys like Dan Casella and the folks with the Williamsburg Battlefield organization, their roundtable, Old Baldy, another unit that I met out there, historical group. All those small units come together to tell the story of the soldiers that fight out here. And with their information and their work, their dedication, they continue to unfold the pieces of history bit by bit in places like this, so that you can understand it, make better estimations of what happened, and actually go to the places where the history happened, which is the most important spot, is the place where the history happened. Once you get out there, it's up to you to paint the picture with your own mind. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to do. And that's where videos like this come into play.
Dear brother, I suppose you wish to hear something from men in reference to our battle. I shall have to be brief, for this is a half sheet of paper. It is all that I have. We lost our knapsacks and everything except what we had on our backs. The money is of no use here yet, for there is nothing to buy. Only once in a while some sutler gets a barrel of crackers, which he sells at 25 cents per pound, and tobacco at $1 a plug. But I must speak of our contest, although it makes me feel very sad that every time that I mention for it renews the recollection that one of our numbers lies beneath the battleground. Oh, we miss him. When the battle commenced, 6 of us Cedarville boys stood in the front rank. At night, 1 lay dead on the field and 2 in the hospital. 3 came out without a scratch, although I had 3 bullet holes through my overcoat cape. I did not know that poor Elmer had fallen, or that Lorenzo Painter or Albert Bateman were wounded until night. One don't notice much that takes place around him in such times as that. After the battle was over, I began to inquire where our boys were, for I had not seen any of them except Joseph Burt. He told me that Elmer Ogden was killed, for he saw him fall, and that Albert Bateman was wounded before he fired a gun, and Lorenzo Painter was also slightly wounded. This was sad news to hear. Sleep was impossible, for we were wet to the skin. We had nothing to eat but a few crackers. How I longed for a cup of hot coffee, but owing to the badness of the roads, the teams could not get to us, so I ate what little I had, drank some hot water, and felt very thankful that it was well with me as it was. We built a large fire and sat by it until morning, when General Hooker, God bless him, sent men on horseback to fetch us something to eat as soon as possible. About 10 o'clock they came with bags of crackers and salt beef slung across the horse's back, and also some coffee. You can't begin to know the joy of us half-starved soldiers, for I don't suppose you have ever had the trial, and God grant you may never. I was so glad to have a piece of raw salt beef that I sat down and cried with joy. Perhaps you may think it was foolish, but even our major shed tears to see the men tear into raw beef with a good relish. After eating all I wanted, I went to the field where we had spent the previous day. There I saw sad sights that I shall never forget. Many of the wounded were still lying on the field, uttering cries that would startle the stoutest heart. The captain said we would bury Elmer where he fell. Sergeant Stiles and myself dug a grave and buried him. This was hard to do. The rebels had taken everything out of his pockets and even the rings off of his fingers. The only thing they left was a pair of gloves, which I sent to his mother. General Hooker says we were whipped 3 times, but did not know it. He says we are not soldiers, but bulldogs. We do not stay in one place long, but we keep marching towards Richmond. The report is the rebels have made a stand towards Richmond, and if it is my duty to be in another contest, I am ready. But I have no wish to see any more battles. I could tell you much more if I had the paper, except we move tomorrow morning. I still remain your brother, Benjamin F. Ogden. And I'd like to close with something from an unidentified officer of the New Jersey Brigade. He says this: the officers and men, without exception, behaved admirably under the hottest fire. New Jersey may well be proud of her sons in this battle. Men never stood more bravely to their work. The conflict at Williamsburg proves that the Jersey Blues of our day are worthy descendants of the heroes who made their name and soil sacred in the times of the dark hours of the Revolution. 3 cheers for the New Jersey Brigade! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Thank you.
So I'm out here with Dan Casella today. We're going to talk a little bit about the event that took place here just a few minutes ago. Go ahead, Dan. Give us a story.
So 162 years ago, on May 5th, this very day, the 7th New Jersey, along with the 5th, 6th, and 8th, were engaged here in their very first battle, and it would be the worst battle for them in the entire war. These are men who will fight at the Wilderness, Gettysburg, Chancellorsville, Williamsburg. Their very first fight is their worst fight, and it will take place right behind us in a newly preserved area known as the Bloody Ravine. And today we dedicated a Civil War Trails marker to the men of the 2nd New Jersey Brigade, highlighting some local individuals to myself, men from Cedarville, New Jersey. Their photograph here, which was found in a book that I stumbled across, and then went to my local cemetery and literally stumbled across their graves. So for myself and for the Old Baldy Civil War Roundtable that helped organize this and put this together, it's an event that has come full circle after years in the making. So this is a very cool moment in time.
Very cool. So oftentimes I find myself, I'm out on the fields the battlefields, and I'm covering the events, and I'm talking to people and telling the story. And that's what people tend to like the most on these types of channels. They like that story, that personal connection. So what's your personal connection to all of this?
I don't have a family member who was here. My only Civil War ancestor was in a New York regiment who fought in South Carolina. My connection is just the living in the town and finding their headstones and finding their letters in my local historical society, which is something I'd like to talk about here for a second. Get involved in your local historical society. Every one of them is a treasure trove of history. I have found things from 1690, all the way to rare World War I fundraising flags to these letters and correspondence from Civil War soldiers that haven't been available since someone put them in the book. And for me to physically go through it and find it, to find the headstones, to find the photograph, to find their letters, to know their ancestors. One of these men still has a living ancestor who comes to our historical society meetings, and it's just becoming more and more than just myself, which is something I really like to do. I just like to tell stories, and this, it started out as something of just, oh, maybe let me find something to this. And it even goes further to walk through cemeteries. Go to your old local cemetery and follow those little green stars or follow those Confederate veteran markers. Every single one of those markers has a story. Every single person is intricate in whatever historical moment that they were involved in. Far too often do we read about, General Meade, General Sickles, General Lee, General Longstreet, all important characters. But the men who did everything that those men put forward, those are the real stories that I'm after, and those are the untold stories. And today, we're here telling an untold story.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dan, for being on camera today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for the work you're doing here.
Thank you. So if you're interested in any more Civil War stories, specifically from South Jersey, where I'm from, there's a podcast to follow, which I host. It's called No Pollution of Cowardice, South Jersey in the Civil War, and you can find it on Spotify and Amazon Music.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much, Dan.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
I met a lady there named Dorothy, and she told me all about her ancestor, a person that she never met personally, of course, because this was 160 years ago, and she doesn't even have a photograph of him, so she has no clue what he looks like other than the description that was on his card that he signed when he joined the military, that described his height, his hair color, and his eye color. But when talking to her and listening to her story, you can tell it's almost as if she knew the person. She has that connection with them, that interpersonal connection, just like as if her own brother went off to war and fought. That's what a lot of people have with this war. I'm out here with Dorothy Wright at the new Civil War Trail site, and she is an actual descendant of one of the members of the New Jersey unit that fought out here.
Yeah, the New Jersey 6th.
New Jersey 6th. So tell us about your relative.
Michael Comer was born in Jersey City. When he was 15, he and his 17-year-old brother enlisted, saying they were 18.
Okay.
Otherwise, they could not have come in. Before the war, he and his brother were firemen in Jersey City. They were specifically recruited for fires. They never made it to the artillery unit, so
wow.
That wasn't, yeah. And he made it, he actually got shot here, but walked away.
Wow. So how did you find out the information about your ancestor?
My father knew this,
okay.
And they actually had his discharge papers.
Okay.
So we actually always had that, but I had, they didn't really, Wikipedia wasn't around then, and they didn't have access to any of the written material,
okay.
Which is here.
Yeah.
I was able to find it because somebody in his unit wrote a book.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, Dorothy, thank you for getting on the video. A few other people there, they were donors It's the American Battlefield Trust. Also, volunteers, folks that work with historical organizations like the ones here in Williamsburg that talk about the American Civil War. And when I asked them the question, the simple question was, what does this mean to the youth? What should the youth take out of this? And their simple answer was, this is our history. To them, there was no question. It's something that every historian feels inside, which is we have an honor-bound duty to dedicate ourselves to keeping these stories alive and to talking about these people and their sacrifices. And one of the reasons why we do these things is because we think about 150 years from now, when we're gone, are people going to tell our stories? Are we going to be brought to the future to stop people from making mistakes there? Or is this going to be washed away and forgotten so the mistakes can be made again? It does seem to happen from time to time. Those are the things that historians do worry about. More importantly, there's no question. It's our history. It's America's history. Okay, so tell me what's your name and what's your affiliation with the sign today?
Well, my name is Bill Miller. I'm the president of the Williamsburg Civil War Roundtable. I'm also a board member of the Williamsburg Battlefield Association. And believe it or not, since you can see this old Baldy sign, I sent them the annual dues a few months back to join their organization because I enjoyed looking at their Zoom programming every month. But with this initiative here, with the sign development, they've had some of their members come down over the past couple of years, and when that's happened on occasion, I've volunteered to take them around and show them where the fighting took place and how the soldiers came to those locations. And we've also looked for the prime sites for the placement of the sign. And this is the best place to interpret the action, even though it's quite a bit distant from where the fighting actually took place. So I've kind of been involved with the program from a peripheral point of view, but it's been a lot of fun because I've had a chance to meet some of the folks that are members of the Old Baldy Roundtable. I know Rich, the president, from other endeavors and so forth. And so this is a big weekend for them, and it's a big weekend for us because it brings history to life here in Williamsburg.
Very good.
Civil War history is not something that's promoted.
Right. Why is something like this important to the youth today?
Because it's history, and it's local history. You don't have to go to Gettysburg. You don't have to go to Antietam. You don't have to go to Manassas to learn about the history of the Civil War. It's right here, hidden in plain view. Even over in York County on the Colonial Battlefield, there's Union and Confederate trenches throughout that whole park that are hidden in plain view. And signs like this interpret the events that took place, and like Drew said, it gives folks an opportunity to see what has happened here for them and for us.
Right. Very good. Well, I appreciate you being on camera today. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, what brings you out here today?
Well, about a week and a half ago, Drew Gruber was with the Civil War Trails. He was planting that sign in the ground, and he asked me to stop over and join him, and I did. And I didn't actually help him, They had all the shovels, but I helped them with the planting of the sign in the ground there, that and the Civil War Trail sign.
Okay. How long have you been affiliated with the Civil War Trails?
I've been with the Williamsburg Battlefield Association for about 6 years now, and along with that, been associated with the Civil War Trails at the same time.
Outstanding. What is the significance and importance of signs like these?
They are part of the broader Civil War Trails outdoor museum concept. It's fantastic. It gives people a chance when they're on vacation, particularly here in Williamsburg. You got Busch Gardens, you got Colonial Williamsburg. It's a great chance to stop by and see some different things. And this particular sign offers that, offers history, and something else to do while they're on vacation here in Williamsburg.
Very good, very good. Well, thank you very much for being on camera today.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so we're out here at the new Civil War Trail sign dedicated to the Jersey boys here from the Battle of Williamsburg. And I have the president with Old Baldy Civil War Roundtable here.
Hello, thank you for tuning in. We're based, Old Baldy Civil War Roundtable, Philadelphia, based in New Jersey, and we came down to support the New Jersey troops. Old Baldy was General Meade's horse during the war, and when the horse died, the soldiers dug him up, put his head on the plaque, and the plaque was hanging in the museum when we were founded. That's how he got the name. An actual horse's head doesn't travel very well, so we created what we call Flat Old Baldy, based on the concept of Flat Stanley, that goes around and visits. You know, we have a smaller version that goes in a suitcase. He's been to Europe, he visits battlefields, he congratulates members and speakers and things like that, so he's an ambassador. And if you go to our Facebook page, on Wednesday mornings he has a feature called Welcome Wednesday, where he's welcoming either a new member or visiting a minor league ballpark, so that's one of the highlights there. Also, check out our website, allbaldycwrt.org. You can find past recordings of our presentations. If you're interested in tuning in to one of ours, just send us an email. We'll send you the Zoom link. We have members in 10 states across the country who tune in. We appreciate any questions you have, just send us an email.
Very good. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for being on camera today and telling us about your organization.
Thank you.
Sometimes history has a funny way of coming back to life. And in a place like Colonial Williamsburg, that happens every single day here, thanks to the actors and the people that are out here keeping history alive. Today, we are not here because of that. Today, we're here because of the powder magazine right over my shoulder there, and the discovery that was made there. It was very significant to the American Civil War. Now, May 5th, 1862 was a pretty historic day for this area around here. The Union soldiers had pressed their way up here, and a all-out general fight was taking place in the area of Williamsburg. A total of 3,800 casualties happened out here during that battle in the American Civil War. And really, it was a draw. The Confederate soldiers were pushed back and withdrew so that they could protect Richmond, and the battle here was basically to slow that army down to keep them from making an all-out press on the capital of the Confederacy. But as a result, like I said, you had those 3,800 casualties. Every house, hospital, every church, every school building, anything that they could get their hands on out here became a hospital for Confederate and Union soldiers. that location over there just happened to have a church near it, and that church became a hospital. They know all this information because the experts out here had dug into the ledgers and the information that was compiled at that time and realized that there are a list of names of people that died out here during the American Civil War. And based on some of the items that were found on these soldiers, they determined that they were Confederate. And based on historic fact, they know that roughly in that location there was once a Baptist hospital or a Baptist church in the Civil War that was turned into a makeshift hospital. And at that location there were a pile of limbs found and eventually a burial trench out there with a bunch of soldiers buried inside. The American Civil War Trails organization and Colonial Williamsburg worked together to try to uncover the secrets of that trench. When they looked at these soldiers, they used forensics just like they use with any other situation with bodies. They uncovered that one of these soldiers had actually been shot in the spine. And another soldier had a wound to the hip, but bone had grown around the bullet that was in his hip. So it had been there for a little bit. It's just kind of some of the unique things that they found out when they were looking at these bodies that were uncovered here in Colonial Williamsburg. Now, amongst some of the items that they found was a toothbrush, a couple of gold coins that were possibly sewn into the pants of a soldier that was buried out there. It's the only way it would have probably still stayed in the grave. An empty snuff container, a buckle, and some brass or copper buttons, which helps to identify these soldiers as being Confederate soldiers. But what also helped was the logs that were kept at that time by the professionals that were out here and by the churches, the various surgeons that did the amputations and dealt with the men as they were wounded during the Battle of Williamsburg. Now, originally, this powder magazine would have been built in the 1700s, and it was built for the purpose of storing the town's weapons and the powder for the militia in the local area. It was rebuilt later on when Williamsburg was created, the rebuild of the town, so that people could come out here and visit and try to see what it would have been like in the colonial periods, just before and during the American Revolutionary War. Still to this day, they are trying to narrow the list down of soldiers to identify the soldiers that were buried over there in that ground. I can imagine it's probably a daunting task. Immediately, all the organizations that are normally involved in things like this, like the Civil War Trails organization, was asked to be involved in this. You can imagine something like this is extremely important to these different organizations that preserve history and tell the story. You have soldiers that are buried out here in these fields. People have been walking on top of these graves, going in and out of that powder magazine for years, not realizing that they're actually walking on top of real soldiers' graves, actual history out here in these fields. Not just rebuilt history thanks to Rockefeller. So finally, after some time, I got a chance to speak with the archaeologists who were out here on the dig, and come to find out that how they found these burials in the first place was they were out here trying to restore the wall and the magazine back to what it looked like during the colonial period. Because at one point in time, one of the walls of the magazine had collapsed before the Rockefellers came along, and the magazine itself was rebuilt, but it wasn't exactly to specs. So they were out here doing work on that. They dig down into the ground, and then they realized, uh-oh, we've uncovered a grave. And according to the archaeologist, he tells me that it's not uncommon for them to run into graves out here, and typically they allow those graves to stay in place because the majority of the time these graves are people that used to live out here somewhere, and maybe it's a graveyard that was supposed to be in place, but because these were soldiers and they identified them as soldiers, they knew that this was not the place that they had intended to be buried. So they decided to go ahead and dig those bodies up and do work to identify them and eventually place them back into the ground with burial honors the way that their family members would have intended it to happen. Now, another tidbit of information that came out of that conversation with the archaeologist, he tells me that they do not know how many bodies are actually buried in the yards around the powder magazine. And the reason why is because they only needed to do work on that one section of wall. So they dug up only that one section of wall, and they found the bodies there, and they did the work there. And of course, they're doing the DNA work necessary to identify those men. They were buried there, and then the remnants of the other men whose legs and arms are there. But they have no idea who these men are And they have no idea how many men are actually buried out there in the grounds, because they didn't do any ground penetrating radar. They haven't done any further digs, so they don't know that there are other people buried in the ground or not. But most likely there are other men buried out here from the Battle of Williamsburg from May 5th, 1862. And maybe even some of the casualties during that Yorktown siege that happened in Yorktown, Virginia, just prior to that. If you can imagine soldiers being lost to time and history, forever, buried in some unmarked grave, to be found 150, 160 years later. It's a pretty amazing find out here. And it's one that I'm sure glad that they did find. The history that they're going to catalog and the lessons that they're going to learn from this is very significant. It's huge to the American Civil War history. So in the end, why was this place so important that a sign needed to be put up here? I mean, there were lots of engagements that New Jersey was involved in, to include Gettysburg, Antietam, and many other spots. And not to mention, a lot larger battles with a lot larger casualty counts for the entire unit, as far as the Union Army is concerned. Well, all in all, New Jersey called this the worst fight they ever got into. They were called bulldogs out here for their tenacity and their toughness and how they got into the fight. New Jersey lost more men here than they did at other places like Gettysburg. And the sign details that. It talks about that history. That's why it's important to have that out here. More importantly, it tells a different side of the story. A lot of the signage and the history that's put in place out here talks about the same stories that you hear in school from a long time ago, with the Confederate Army and the Union Army and a big general overview of everything. But signs like this one tell the individual story, which is what we try to do with these videos here at History with Waffles. We try to tell those individual stories and give you a better picture of what those common soldiers went through. Now, like I said, New Jersey was filled with soldiers. They were young, putting their lives on hold. They didn't get to go to college at that time. There was no going to high school and living like a regular kid. For them, it was war. It was fighting, combat, and it was the future of their nation. All of that at the same time was on their shoulders. And some of them were just 17. Well, till next time, it's History with Waffles.